We continue following that breaking news on CBS News 24/7. A manhunt now underway after a targeted attack, a murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. He was shot in the back, killed outside a Hilton hotel in Midtown Manhattan. You see the police there, the police tape, the barricade. Here's what we know so far. NYPD says it appears the gunman was, quote, lying in wait for several minutes outside that hotel. As Thompson walked up to the building, the gunman approached him from behind, shot him in the back. Thompson apparently also took a bullet to the leg as he fell. He wasn't robbed, so that wasn't a motive. Police do not really know what the motive could be. United Healthcare security and investigators now comb through files for any possible threats of disgruntled or recently fired employees as they try to figure out a motive here. But expanding the conversation out, who is Mr. Thompson? He led United Healthcare, which is one of the nation's largest healthcare insurers, more than 100,000 employees all over the country. He was named Chief Executive Officer in April of 2021, and before that, he headed that company's government programs for business, including Medicare and retirement sectors. CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleiman is joining us now. Let's talk about what is happening. So they've got a murder investigation on their hands, right? They're going to comb through those records to see who, if anybody, would have been motivated to do that, but also a manhunt. And you've worked extensively with the NYPD. You know how they work.
The NYPD is as good as it gets when it comes to an investigation of a homicide. Also here, what you have is a great deal of video. And the assailant was seen riding this e-bike, this city e-bike, through Central Park. That's the last sighting that we know of at this point in time. New York has an enormous amount of camera coverage. So you've got the surveillance having to do with camera coverage. You also have the fact that he left shell casings there, so there is a possibility of DNA. You also know that he is proficient with guns, because at one point it's reported that his gun jammed, and yet he was able to alleviate that jam and continue to shoot. We have learned that there have been threats that have come out against Mr. Thompson, and his poor wife, who at this point, the last thing she needed was to be bothered when she has to be dealing with her family. But nonetheless, she has given a statement, according to the New York Post, that there were threats, and she believed that they came from people involving lack of coverage. Now, that's the preliminary. And as my husband, who was the police commissioner in New York, is wont to say, the first story is never the last story. And the story will develop over time here, probably minute to minute, hour to hour. But I bet my money on the NYPD at any point in time to solve this.
Well, and it begs the question, if that reporting is correct that you cite in the New York Post that there had been threats attributed to his wife, who is now going to have to plan a funeral, why was he not traveling with personal security? He was in charge of a major company, 100,000 employees.
You never know. First of all, we don't know what those threats were, if there were threats, because as I say, the first story is not necessarily the last story.
Right.
But what we do need to find out is if there were threats, were they reported to other people in the company, and should he have been traveling with personal security? There is a great deal of executive security that is available throughout the United States. At the same time, you certainly may have the right to say, oh, these threats don't mean anything. And you might have had them checked out even by your company and found out that they were just threats in the wind. And we'll find out if, in fact, they truly existed.
Sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead, friend.
No, there is always the reality that any CEO of a healthcare company is always having to deal with the fact that there are going to be plenty of people who have coverage by that healthcare company who are unhappy. However, it is a far cry from being an unhappy healthcare consumer and being someone who becomes as proficient as this shooter was. This is someone who planned this, someone who was laying in wait, someone who actually was also a very good shot.
Something that struck me that I want to ask you about. This happened not far from Rockefeller Center, and we have heard officials in New York say that the tree lighting, the ceremonies, the holiday ceremonies will go on. And yet this person was last seen on an e-bike in Central Park, armed, taking a life, not far away from where he was last seen or she was last seen. Are you struck as a New Yorker that everything is going to continue there at Rockefeller Center?
Absolutely, everything is going to continue. This is someone who is not a danger to the public at large. This is someone who had a target, and he planned his assault and his killing very, very meticulously. So this is not someone who is like an active shooter who may be considered armed and dangerous, someone who's escaped from a prison who may be armed and dangerous. This is someone who knew what he was doing and had one person in mind. New York is very resilient. New York believes, as we have seen after 9/11, that you must go about your business and continue to go forth if it is safe for the public to do so. Right now, the police commissioner and the mayor have deemed that it is safe, and I certainly believe that they know what they're talking about.
All right, so we're going to take off this hat for a minute and ask that you put on another hat. We're also watching developments very closely as jurors enter day 2 of deliberations in that trial of Daniel Penny, that 26-year-old veteran. He pled not guilty, argues his actions on that subway and that chokehold instance that was fatal were justified. Prosecutors say Penny used too much force for too long when he gripped Jordan Neely, who died by the neck for almost 6 minutes. The jurors are really looking at two very key things here, and you feel like they may go for one over the other. Explain that.
Well, there's always the difficulty that is from either the prosecution or the defense point of view, that when you have two charges which are this close, you have a manslaughter charge which involves reckless conduct, and you have a criminally negligent homicide charge which involves negligent conduct. They're really separated almost by a thread. And in each case, the risk that Daniel Penny took while he was acting in this chokehold and how long it was held, the risk has to be unjustifiable and substantial, but it also has to be one of a certain magnitude to reach recklessness. Oftentimes, when there is one count, like the manslaughter count, and nothing beneath it, you might have an acquittal or you might have an easy conviction, depending on the evidence. But when you have this middle charge of criminally negligent homicide, it often happens that jurors, especially if they're out for days, may decide to compromise on a verdict. And if I were the defense, I would be most worried about them coming back with the lesser, with criminally negligent homicide. Keep that in mind also. There's a 4-year penalty for criminally negligent homicide. There's a 15-year maximum penalty for the manslaughter.
CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleiman, thank you so much for a fascinating conversation. I hope to see you back here on CBS News 24/7. Great to